We've got some intense heat, but we won't be here for a long time, so that's okay.
It is a cost, brother, of numerous calories to be out here on this Florida morning.
Yeah.
It's not even noon yet. What is it, 92 degrees right now?
Yeah, and so we apologize for the sweat dripping off our faces.
It happens.
But yes, we're definitely in some heat. But I actually enjoyed that walk that we had here this morning.
Yeah.
We got to catch up and talk a little bit, and you know, it's a nice little campus that we're at right now.
And you made me pull the cart the whole way.
I
I'd
did.
like to point out.
I will pull it on the way back.
Didn't even offer over any of those routes we crossed. I mean, it was like Lewis and Clark coming through, and I was doing all the work.
You had it dialed in, so I didn't want to disrupt your flow.
That's what it was. Yeah. We had 2 weeks ago an evolution talk. We talked with a nice young lady, sat down with us. Of course, we're hoping anybody else would sit today as well. It's let me take these off so people can see my beautiful face. You know, a bit of a ghost town here between semesters at the University of South Florida, but we're doing evolution part 2 today. And we're just going to chew the cud on a number of subjects around it in this talk. And we're so happy that you would join us again here today. Had a lot of response to Evolution Part 1 and talked to, I don't even remember everything we talked about it. And we had the young lady come in for a good portion of it, and we talked about some of the claims of evolution and kind of where she comes down on things and how we've all been taught this. So we're going to continue some of that today, but do you have any opening thoughts to get us started this morning?
You know, one of the things that I was thinking about reflecting on that conversation from before was, you know, the young lady said, well, because of my past, that's why I believe. I don't know if you remember that, but she was kind of alluding to her upbringing, right? So it, you know, even though they were in a Christian home, and she said her parents were Christian, to me, that is one of the saddest parts of as kids leave the home and come into college and come into the secular world with work, that disparity from when they leave home to when they, you know, finish college or in college, why is that disconnect there? Yeah. You know, why are they falling so far to the other side? Because she would say, I believe in evolution, we all came from a fish. Yeah. She had that claim, even though, and again, we didn't really get into it with her, and I'm just maybe talking about other students, and even some of the students that, you know, that are at our church and other people we speak to. Why does that disconnect happen? Yeah. You know, why do they decide to then just go off to the other side completely?
To an atheistic side.
Atheistic side, evolution, no more creation, there isn't a God.
And I think most of them would say, from maybe whatever they believed as a Christian growing up or professing Christian, they would probably come down on the agnostic side, where once they mix and mingle with those ideas of naturalism, we can explain the world without a God or appeal to the supernatural entirely. So that is naturalism. That's the view that you can explain the why and the what and the when without appealing to any sort of supernatural claims. Once that gets muddied and mixed into our thinking, which is let's just be honest, relatively new phenomena in human history. Most people in the world, like overwhelming 99%-ish kind of thing, aren't atheistic. Cultures are not atheistic. They are all kinds of spiritualistic, but they are not atheistic. It's not natural explanation. But in our culture and in other cultures as well, last 165 years, we have had a change in thinking that has produced again, the Christian youth will often come out saying, if there is a God, I don't know if we can know who that being is. So I'm an agnostic.
Which is the real God?
Yeah. Questions like that. Yeah. And so that's, I think, what you're saying is what you're asking. Why does that disconnect happen? I think most often, even your ardent atheist will begin, you know, very dogmatically about evolution. And once you scratch just below the surface, you'll see an agnostic claim begin to emerge very quickly.
So let me ask you a question, Joseph. Like, if somebody coming with that foundation of Christianity and being brought up in a Christian home, do you think thinking agnostically or going to that other side, having that disconnect, gives them a reason to live in their sin? Yeah.
That is absolutely something that I even had in my notes. The Bible says very clearly, men don't love God. They are opposed to God, hostile to God by nature. Okay? We're not simpatico, not with the true God. We're simpatico with any idolatry, with other views that would remove God from superintending or being in control of our lives. We rebel against our Creator. And without that certainty for me, I wouldn't understand why anybody would believe in evolution. It makes no sense to me in this world why anybody would believe it, except once you factor that in. Absolutely. And so whether you grew up in a Christian-esque home, or maybe you grew up in a Christian home, you're not one, or you grew up in a hypocritical home, maybe, right? It could be either or.
Either or, yeah.
That rebellion is innate from birth in us all. And once you give vent to that, you can do it in a number of ways. You can do it religiously. You could do it with sex. You could do it with drugs. You could do it with rock and roll. You could do it with all sorts of things, or a naturalistic worldview. And naturalism demands nothing of you. It lets you be whatever you want to be, however, whenever.
Whoever, whatever.
And that is very appealing to the carnal nature of man.
Absolutely.
So absolutely. It is therefore a very angry atheist named Dave Farina. I had a brief response back and forth based on our video. Well, actually, no, I posted something on one of his videos, and that's where the response came. It wasn't in response to ours.
Okay.
Where we talked about these, very foul-mouthed, very instantly, clearly biased about different things. And he asked me, what's religious about the evolutionary worldview? And I just very, very briefly broke down, and I said, Jesus taught that he created man and, woman, created the heavens and the earth in the beginning. Your worldview says no. What could be more religious than opposing the religious figure of a group than claiming a completely opposite worldview? And I began to break down with him, again, very briefly, how that functions as a religion. And that's what Darwinism has become.
Yeah.
It's become a real dogmatic philosophical commitment that people have. We know that God is not the answer. We're not even going to entertain that. So let's find the answer in the Petri dish. Let's find it on the sidewalk. And does Jesus' teaching not intersect there? It does. But again, we're out here to talk about the mindset and the view of evolution.
Absolutely.
We want to challenge it because it is a house of cards.
Yeah, and it's becoming more and more prevalent.
Yeah.
Especially as guys like him have these platforms to go out and meet these younger kids.
Yeah.
As soon as they jump on social media or YouTube or any of this, now they can go out and find it, right?
Yeah.
And I believe as they come in and they leave the house and they leave high school and they're entering into college and they're seeing all these different things, they're hearing all these different things, and unlike before, now they are able to go out and start doing their own research online.
Yeah. There's so much info.
Right?
Here's another video.
And then that's just another reason I believe that it's just spreading so much.
Right. And I actually have a point similar to that today that we hopefully will take a shot at, where we talk about social contagion and the way that ideas do indeed spread. And as we said, I think in our last talk, Darwin changed the rules.
Yeah.
He wasn't the first naturalist, he wasn't the last, but he changed the rules in popularizing a theory of natural selection that purports to explain how the diversity of life we see today has come into being. And he never postulated even a theory formally on the origins of life. And there's a whole scientific discipline today on OOL, origin of life studies. These are biologists, these are chemists, these are physicists. There's not, I don't think, an overabundance of them, but they do exist. They're out there trying to figure out how you can get abiogenesis. How does life emerge from non-life? Because if you had a Big Bang explosion, boom, there's no life there. What has to occur in time for chemicals to somehow begin to coalesce and produce life? That is origin of life studies. Abiogenesis, out of nothing. It usually leans toward chemicals.
Okay.
And the most we have from Darwin on the idea is in a letter to another dude, not in The Origin of the Species, but another letter where he says, I suppose, something to the effect of, I suppose somewhere if we had imagined a pond or a lake or an ocean somewhere where there's a little bit of, like polypeptide material. I don't think he used that term. I don't think it was existing that day, but simple chemicals and maybe a little bit of the proteins here and maybe some electricity, like lightning. or something, and then boom, it's kind of like the Marvel Comics thing. You get hit with a gamma ray, you become Hulk.
Okay.
Right? Like let's just throw out something
that unrealistic,
totally unrealistic, but let's throw it out there. And that's as far as he went with
the movie
idea.
theology is what I call it.
It's Hollywood.
Hollywood, yeah.
But the hero of the plot is always billions of years. The hero, the unsung hero, is, yes, it might be ridiculous, but just give it a billion years. And then suddenly you can get hit. Like, I remember when I was young, there was a character called Plutonium Baby. Okay. Where like a kid fell in a vat of like plutonium, you know, and you get the Spider-Man thing. He gets bit by the radioactive spider. He can climb walls, and it produces that which is unscientific, undocumented, unprovable, unfalsifiable. Therefore, because nobody can recreate those conditions, even though that's what they're trying to do with any sort. Nobody was there in the beginning. We don't know the origins of it.
Right.
All of this to, again, if you didn't want to not believe in God, it wouldn't make sense to embrace this kind of a view. And I don't ever want us to forget that in these dialogues, because we can talk about cytochromes and we can talk about things that I have in my notes to look at.
Yeah.
And we should, to see that these things are examined, but there are better answers. But that's not the only area of consideration. We are more in this discussion as Christians than just that. We are unapologetic supernaturalists. I don't believe the answer is natural. I believe you'll find natural causality and you can explore how God did stuff. My debate on Friday with this Muslim fella, I'm going to say something similar to this, to just say the Bible's not a science book. It is not a chemistry book. It's not a cosmology book. It is a divine revelation. It's not a hypothesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth is not a hypothesis. It's a declaratory statement of God.
Absolute truth statement.
And the scientists today won't purport to speak from the same authority, so she or he must find other ways to speak from their viewpoint. But I'm not interested in finding a similar viewpoint. Like, I'm not going, well, here's naturalistically why I believe in the beginning. I am unapologetically a supernaturalist. So you cannot explain life outside of the God who made it.
Yes.
And that's not just because of what we don't know in science. It's because of all that we do know in science. Every legitimate science, it's because we do know. So if I ask you a question and I say, have you ever heard of the idea of the myth of neutrality?
I have not.
Never heard that before.
No.
So what comes to mind when I say a myth of being neutral or of neutrality?
Just having no one way or the other. I'm neutral. Hey,
Exactly.
I don't believe this. I don't believe that. I'm just going to stay neutral
We can
because
be
I don't know
objective.
what to believe.
We can be objective,
Right.
right? Totally objective.
Hey, I'll listen to you. I'll listen to you, but I'm going to remain with my opinions being neutral.
Biblically speaking, is that not clearly a myth?
Absolutely.
Nobody can be unbiased. Nobody can be unprejudiced. If the Bible is true that men rebel against God, then right there immediately nobody's neutral.
Nobody is neutral.
Okay, so we can't be. It's a myth. This is a myth in politics. This is a myth in like the whole kinds of ideas in science as well. There's a myth of neutrality, and as Christians, we know what things happen when you bring in money. All right, we are at a university that is not built on evolutionary silliness. I'm sure there are people here that espouse it, but it's not like it's the only goal of it, right? What happens when you bring in $1 billion to motivate someone to do anything? What can come in?
Oh, idea shift.
Yeah.
Instantly.
Instantly.
Motivation
corrupting.
shifts.
This is true in a church.
I was
Money
just
can
about
do
to
it.
say that it's just true in other areas.
It's true in marriages,
Business.
business. You can anything. Politics. You get up into the billions, though. Like people don't realize the difference between $1 million and $1 billion.
Yeah.
How big that difference is, right? We're not talking millions. That's nothing compared to a billionaire. A billionaire, the difference between $1 million and $1 billion is hard to imagine how big it really is. We're talking billions of dollars in naturalism and study. We're talking careers, we're talking publications, we're talking fame, we're talking reputation. Once you stake your reputation on something, are you not going to find anything you can to support it?
Absolutely.
You're going to immediately be skeptical of that which denies it. I'm the same way. I want everybody listening to this to understand, don't assume anybody's neutral. You can't do it. Now, it's because nobody is. If it's your career, if it's what you've written or what you've stated about life or your research, or let's say you've gotten a grant because you've promised to try to find an answer here or there, you're invested in that, man.
So you're
And
being swayed, basically. You're
it's-
being swayed by...
it has to happen.
Yeah.
You know? It's not that it's an evil thing necessarily at all. I'm just saying nobody's neutral. Nobody comes at these questions about life without their experiences, filtering what they like and what they've received and what they don't, what they support and what they don't.
Yeah.
And we sitting here today are no different. We are doing the same thing, but there's this myth that once you explore it, and that's why I'm trying to talk about it, I think people agree very, very quickly. But because we don't explore it, we have this estimation. Here's the thing. If you were to sit on a in this, theater over here and ask any question about anything really in life, and you had on a panel discussion in front of a group of people, a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, and a preacher, who do you think in the crowd the most in the crowd would automatically assume is the least qualified to be there, the most biased, and the least, I'm not going to learn much from that dude?
The preacher.
Immediately the preacher. Secularism has created a myth of neutrality. We are neutral in the scientific community. We just look at evidence.
We look at it all.
Nothing but evidence. That is a lie. Nobody is neutral. The preacher might be the most biased and the least qualified, but so might the lawyer. And so might the teacher. And so might the doctor. There is this myth that education produces objectivity. When in fact, I think we all believe and understand it produces the opposite. Now, the more we talk about it, the underlying assumption, the more we can take that into our Christian study or our atheistic study or our whatever subject, and it will help us remember none of us are objective. That's my point. There's a myth
I like that. Yeah.
to assume that we are. So, and remember this too, when it comes to, as a Christian talking about evolution, we are attempting to reason with people who in our day are generally going to prove themselves to be unreasonable. Here's what I mean. Could any Christian support abortion?
No.
Can't do it, all right? It's a life. Everybody knows it. This is not...
So along those same lines, can any Christian remain neutral on that subject?
Tell me what you mean by be neutral. Just not get involved in the debate?
I'd rather not even.
Okay. I think it wouldn't be a good reason to. I think that they do. There's pressures and different things that people don't want to get involved in. That's a very hot button topic. I don't think they should be quiet. We should not be neutral.
Right?
Yeah.
We should not.
Yeah, I agree. We should not be neutral because we all know that over 60 million people have been murdered in the U.S. alone since 1973, and it's legal, right? Now, most of the people you're going to have discussions with about naturalism, about Darwinism, would say that it's a woman's choice. It just goes with the current population of kids and adults alive today, the people we're going to interact with. That is an unreasonable thing. The study I had on here, I'll tell you what, let's do this. I'll just finish with this point. Maybe we get to that study, maybe we don't. But they would say that science can't tell that it's a baby in the womb or not. Can't prove scientifically that that's a baby in the womb. Now, if you want to purport that that's your view, my point is here, you're showing yourself to be an unreasonable person. So I need to be aware that when I try to talk reason and logic and bring it into the discussion of evolution, I'm usually speaking with an unreasonable person. I need to understand that. And for anybody that would hold the naturalistic world view and hear this or watch this, they would say, well, I do support abortion. All I'm saying is your mind has been corrupted by things that we as Christians don't leave out. And so when we have discussions about like how we interpret data in the world, we understand how this skews you. You are skewed against God and what is true and what is beautiful and what is good. And so that baby in the womb, this is my point. Science, quote unquote, would be, we can't prove whether that's a human being or not. And how ridiculous is that?
It's insane to me.
It's insane. It
It's
literally
insane. It's
is
insanity.
insane.
Yeah.
It's insanity. Or how about the same thing, there's a difference between men and women. You know, is there a difference between men and women? There are so many people out today that would say no. But these are the kind of people that want to talk to you about Darwinism.
Yeah.
Right?
They have those skewed mentality, right?
It affects and it shows something. Should we all get the COVID vaccine? Should we all wear masks and be insane and shut down this education of our kids for years and all of that? If you follow the science, I just keep finding the money behind it.
Yeah.
I keep trying to follow science.
We've all seen what happened there.
Yeah. Yeah. Pfizer, right?
The money trail.
All this stuff.
Now you can follow the money trail and find out exactly what happened.
Billions. Hundreds of billions of dollars were made in this thing. And now we all know that corrupts. And all I want to say, part of what I want to say is that corrupts the scientific method as well.
Yeah.
And if you don't agree with that, I really can't help you. Like, you're unreasonable. All right. I agree that it would pervert Christians, and I agree that it perverts naturalists alike. Money can do that.
Absolutely.
Maybe it doesn't. Maybe, again, somebody has
There's exceptions to it, I'm sure, right?
There are.
Just like anybody else.
But nobody's objective entirely. Yeah. So there's a myth of neutrality. We don't purport that we have it. We are Christians. We want to take the data that supports that and filter it all through that commitment that we've got.
And that's what we hold firm to.
The naturalist does the same thing.
Yeah.
And so we're just going to have to debate those kinds of things. Nobody assumes that politicians are without bias. Why do we assume it about scientists? There's no one without motive. There's no one without these things involved, at least not throughout a career or the whole of someone's life. Homology is a study of like organs that exist, like the hand. So you start out with one bone, you go to one bone, you break it up into two sub things, and then it goes into 5 bones, and you see that in a frog, and you see that in a human, like in the structure of their bones.
Okay.
And so the idea of homology is supposed to prove a common ancestry, a common descent. This is a big one thrown out all the time, homology.
Okay.
Now, every evidence that's given for homology as equally, in fact, more so supports a common designer. It does not prove a common ancestry. And so when you look at people that'll say, in the arguments here in the university, ones that on this very campus have been stated to me as evidence for evolution, they're going to say homologically, you look at bone structures in men and in chimpanzees or something like that, it proves a common descent. That we had a common ancestor. The theory goes, and it's back and forth, about 6 million years ago, that humans broke off from some ape-like ancestor of which chimpanzees also broke off. And that ancestral thing that nobody knows what the heck it was, all kind of names thrown out, is where we descended. And so when you look at the bone structures, for example, in these two creatures, a human and a chimp, you see proof, quote unquote, of common descent.
So some similarities.
Similarities. And It's not just chimps, it's, again, frogs and pigs and everything else. So here's the creationist response to it, or part of it. If God is designing something that works pretty well, he's going to use it over and over and over. Now, where do you go with evidence beyond that? Beyond the theoretical, necessary, dialoguing, your evidence says one thing to you, my evidence says one thing to me, and there's nowhere we can go beyond that to assert anything beyond it. This is very important these are the kind of arguments that'll come. Well, homology, they prove common designer, not common ancestry. And in fact,
there's no definitive proof in that.
Well, the National Center for Science and Education has said very clearly that homology is not proof of common descent. You can't use it's circular reasoning, as evidence of common descent. And so me as a Christian, the analogy goes very similar, and we talked last time we were out a little bit about this, that if I look at I think we mentioned it exactly like this, if I have a jet or a plane that works well, and I have the fuselage and I have 2 wings, and I design a jet engine to propel it or a prop engine to propel it, the same design is going to incorporate numerous similar parts. I'm going to see the need of, if this piston that's pumping the fuel into the spark plugs is working, I use that same in a subsequent design to design. There is nothing, therefore, in any of the homological studies we can do that would take what we're saying outside of the realm of reasonability. If God did design life, and even allow for the natural selection within that life designed, which we do see in species and interbreeding and epigenetics and all those different things. That's reasonable. It has limits in design, but it does not, nothing that anybody finds regarding similar studies of homology would contradict what we're saying, that God designed life, it's in its genetics, and similar parts are used.
Got it.
And then, of course, you look at an octopus. I mean, that sucker is so dissimilar from you, right? Like, you have to, this is where theories are going to diverge.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say God created a amazing array of life that blows the mind.
So many.
And you're going to say it all descended from different creatures descending. We can both do the work and map trees and say creatures we think exist here and here and here that are similar here, here, here. Do the work. It's fun. But if you're going to point ultimately to a naturalistic explanation, that's where we're going to have, again, nothing but philosophical disagreement. We're going to hash that out.
Have to. Yeah.
It's not definitive in either way what homology demonstrates. It cannot be. So no matter what somebody thinks, it's supposed evidence of it, it is not certain. And here's what happens a lot. And I watched a study recently, or not a study, I watched an hour and 15 minutes, Dr. James Tour, and I have his name here, Dr. Hector Zanil. And Hector Zanil, you just listen to the dude talk. He's an atheist, but he is you just know you're listening to an intellectual giant talk. You know, he's worked for NASA. He's published all over. He's a mathematician. He's a
really smart guy.
Credentials are there for a reason in his field. And he joined Dr. James Tour on a talk. This was within the last 4 months, examining the presentation of Dr. Lee Cronin. Lee Cronin debated Jim Tour at Harvard within the last year on origins of life. Lee Cronin's a published, respected, I believe he's a chemist as well as Jim Tour. And again, Hector Zanil is a mathematician and etc. An atheist. Jim Tour is a Christian. Lee Cronin, I believe, is an atheist. But Zanil joined Jim Tour because what Lee Cronin presented in his presentation on his research, Jim Tour tried to say, well, could he just be confused about it? And Dr. Zanil is saying, maybe, but I say he's lying. And he goes through why he's lying. I mean, it was so boring, frankly. The data that they went over is way above the head of most of us, but he's got it on the screen and he's saying, here's what Lee Cronin is saying, that makes no sense. He's a mathematician, he's saying that doesn't work, here's why. And then he gets to the point where he says, well, I reached out to Lee Cronin prior to his publication of this and showed him this doesn't work, he's copying from this, he's basically stealing and lying.
Wow.
And he's not saying, look, this is everybody in the scientific community, but they're saying we need safeguards because these guys will just put out fallacious claims that are lies. They know it, but it gets the clickbait.
Yeah.
And it gets the research grants and it gets the information. Doctor, you can go and find it. James Tour, Hector Zanil.
Ulterior motives to this of what's being put out.
And it goes back to the point of neutrality.
Yeah.
Nobody has it. And I'm not making the accusation of it. I'm saying that it made sense. I listened to the whole talk, what Dr. Zanil was saying. And again, he, at the very beginning, comes out and says, I don't share Jim Tour's religious convictions. I'm an atheist. But when I saw this presentation of Dr. Cronin presenting this, I had to speak up.
Wow.
This is, and again, Jim was trying to be polite and say, could they just be maybe confused? And they threw the bone, and maybe, okay, maybe he's just, but this guy is playing at a level you don't play around like that. And so they throw out these titles like, this changes everything, and we've discovered this. And they see the titles, and they know it, and it's a lie, and they let it go.
Wow.
Okay, so the subjects like homology, this is what happens. If you and I were to look at a section of DNA, this is a big one. You remember, I think it was in 2005 when they mapped the human genome sometime around then.
Okay.
And they said that monkeys, chimpanzees, and humans were 99% similar in their DNA.
In the DNA structure, right?
Yes.
Their DNA buildup.
Their buildup. They examined it. This is the explosion of the information revolution. DNA was decoded or discovered in the 1950s, and subsequent studies in the 70s, you know, all throughout. By the year 2000, 2005, I think, if I remember that right, maybe as late as 2015, studies were being produced about mapping the entirety of the human genome. And of course, there were promises of curing cancer, promises of curing AIDS, promises of curing all kind of things that nobody is anything closer to. We're only further away, by the way. But the claims were being made. And there was this big paper that was published in, I believe, a respected journal called Nature, where they said humans and chimps are 99% similar. But here's what happened. And we know this now, looking at the studies, and it's admitted and it's understood. But of course, the people doing it don't want to talk about it. They want to just move on. If you take a section of DNA and examine what you want to examine, so here's your DNA strand. We're going to examine this much of it and compare this much that we like with this one over here. We can say that these two small sections are 99% similar, but they leave out the rest.
Sounds familiar, like that's happened somewhere else.
Where's that happen?
The examination of the Bible.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Bring it. Bring it. Yeah. Look
So,
at one part.
Can you take one part,
Yeah.
compare it to another part, and then come up with something different?
So the test of Christian theology is consistency in the whole.
Totality.
Right? And we all want that in our theories. And the scientists would say they want it too, but exactly right. But this can be where it begins to be manipulated and misused and dangerous.
Wow.
Now, if you compare one section, often what's used is cytochrome C. Cytochrome C is a gene that is present in organic life, monkeys, men, fish, go-karts, I don't know, anything that's carbon-based,
Go-karts.
you're going to have this similar item in there. Now, if you compare this certain cytochrome, you're going to have similarities. Now, if you compare the other cytochromes, like cytochrome B, you're not going to make the same conclusions because they're nowhere near the same. Like, they don't line up the way they want. And so what scientists can do, and there's all kind of flowery language ways to do this. There's all kind of ways to say, we're just
make it
learning.
sound so good.
We're just learning. We don't know everything. We're just examining one thing, and based on the research here, we have this thing. But then you look at the title of it, the paper, let's say, and it'll say something like, "We've proven monkeys and humans are the same." Something like that, right?
Here's proof, right?
Here's proof.
There's your clickbait. Here's proof.
And the research, if you're at a university and you're doing a study, you have a media department that will run those titles by the publishers. You see them because, I don't have the knack to take down big titles and make them like newspaper, 5 words or less kind of thing. People do that for a living.
Yeah.
And they see it, they let it go out, and this is the kind of thing we see. So if you and I were to take a white polyester choir robe and Batman's suit, and they had similar buttons on them, and we examined the buttons, we could say these outfits are like 100% the same.
Yeah.
Right?
They're the same
they're
thing.
the same thing. But we're leaving out one's a white polyester choir robe and one is Batman's suit.
Yeah.
This is what happens in genetic studies. Now, if you look at the whole DNA structure, subsequent studies have revealed this, you're going to get down to about 85% similarity in the genes. Now, for many people, they'd say, well, isn't that enough? I mean, 85% similarity. Do you know how different that is? 300 to 400 million genetic letters difference in variation.
Wow.
Even just getting down to that, let's say it was 99%. That's about 30 million genetic variations between chimps and humans. A watermelon is 99% water, and a cloud is 100% water. That's how different we are than chimpanzees. And if you look at the evidences of it, it is hilarious, frankly. It's a religious idea that is birthed out of a commitment to the naturalistic worldview to say that that is evidence of common descent.
Yeah.
Homology, the studies of genes, things like that, the genome that is supposed to, by phenotype, lay out the graphs of where creatures descended. Again, we're all dealing with the same evidence. We all just have creation. We've got the blood work. We've got the microscopy. I have a problem with that word. Has really developed, and we can see down into the cell in amazing ways. We're building telescopes like James Webb that can see further in space. Technology is advancing,
for sure.
And the more we learn about the cell, the more we learn about how our bodies work, the further we get from believing that it is possible abiogenically. Okay, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's, the fact that this data and these things can be manipulated, to me, That means that anybody could just go out and say whatever they want.
Yeah.
And with having that agenda of whether it be money or ideology, whatever is behind it, and we obviously know who's behind it, but it amazes me that it is still allowed to be put out there without something being actually proven to be factual, right?
Yeah. Or the facts can be manipulated.
Or even the facts can be manipulated.
What they're not.
Correct.
It happens. It happens all the time. And who checks a theoretical physicist?
Nobody.
Another theoretical physicist only. How many of them are there? Like a dozen,
yeah.
or something?
That so somebody in the media department is going to look at it and say, oh, wow, look at all these big words. I mean, this guy's got to be right. Let's put this out there. Right. I mean, let's go. We'll just modify the title to make it more appealing.
Tell me if you agree with this. Most people watching this video assume that scientists somewhere in a lab have proven anything regarding origin of life. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that
it might not even be a scientist, just somebody in a white coat.
Oh, yeah, making toothpaste. The latest, greatest toothpaste, right?
I mean, you just got to have a white coat on.
You have a white coat. They would assume, as I did, that somewhere in a lab on the planet, somebody has made a single molecule out of nothing.
Yeah.
They haven't. Nobody's done this, okay? And you can't do it. And I've said this to atheists recently, and I've never gotten a response. I'd look forward to interacting with an atheist on this in the future, so I want to. They say, how can you falsify the claims of Christianity? Falsification is you have a prediction about how something works. You can manipulate the circumstances to prove whether your prediction is true or not. And so if you believe that a certain cell will react in a certain way based on a certain antibiotic, you postulate a hypothesis, you put it out there, and you can control that where you introduce, say, 10% of that substance, see what happens.
Little by little.
And then 100%.
Yeah.
And you see what happens. And you falsify your prediction. You say, okay, that didn't work. Here's why. Because I'm able to falsify what I'm saying. And the question comes to the Christian, how can you falsify Christianity? Therefore, we're going to dismiss it, because you can't. And my response has been, the moment you create something out of nothing, we can falsify Christianity. The Christian statement that God made, and I heard a recent atheist in a debate say this, creationists, they say, believe that God created out of nothing everything. Scientists, he said, don't believe that.
Yeah.
Now, most scientists I meet, I gotta tell you, I don't meet many, don't break that down very well. I don't know how you go from a singularity, which as I understand it, is all of matter in the universe reduced down to an atomic point. Like I'm just going, hey man, I packed to travel somewhere, and I know I can't fit all of my closet into a suitcase, but you're gonna tell me that that is a theory that makes sense? Make it make sense. Like, let's talk about that. But they would say that the matter predated the Big Bang. So it existed somewhere. That makes more sense to me than saying it came out of nothing.
Nowhere, or just out of nowhere. It just magically appears.
So I don't know what most atheists believe. I don't think they do either. Again, there's all sorts of factions and divisions in the evolutionary camp. They don't agree. It's not like there's some monolithic statement about how all this stuff works or something. That's another illusion that's out there, a myth. Like, everybody believes
it's all the same.
Except you creationist people. That is a myth that I promise you, spend 1 hour exploring it, you will see it. That people do disagree about these things. And again, time is always the hero. So the hero is, just give it billions of years.
Yeah.
And that is something also we need to confront. And let's do it here. If 6 million years ago, that's the 99, let's give them the 99%, which we know, we being those who are exploring this. I'm listening to geneticists, I'm listening to biologists, and I'm listening to other researchers in chemistry that would say we know that it's not 99% similar. If you examine the gene pool, chimps and humans, for example, you get down to about 85%. That's 350 million. That's 300 to 400 million, they say, genetic letter differences in the codes that would have had to have come about through natural causality for a creature to descend from an ape-like creature to a human being, and the differences are so vastly different between that and the chimp that there's a timeline suggestion. 6 million years is supposedly the timeline. But if you look at the math on the amount of time, researchers agree on this, of what it would have to, let's give them the 99%. 1% difference. That's still about 30 million genetic variable changes in the code that would have had to occur for a creature to go from anything like the ancestral creature to a human being in our genome, or the chimpanzee that they're trying to create and make this comparison to fit the data to make it create the narrative. It would take somewhere around 200 million years.
Okay.
6 million
For that 1%.
for the 1%.
Okay.
The 30 to 40 million changes, giving the rates of which they assume this can occur naturally, would take about 200 million years to occur. Once the data is brought in, you've got to tweak and mess with your numbers, and that's what people are doing, again, based on their commitment to a philosophical idea of naturalism. We're going to explain this naturally. We're going to leave God out. He didn't make it. You have to do that with it. Time isn't your friend to the evolutionist. If you listen to Jim Torr, the physicist or the chemist, talk about this, he'll say these chemicals that we're working with, trying to recreate a prebiotic condition that we're surmising was on the Earth X billion years ago. They are extremely volatile and subject to decay and death. Some of them only last for hours.
Wow.
You have to make them replicate and make it work inside hours with some of them.
So now that's a very limited time frame.
Hours.
Wow.
Like that's all you've got. And he said these are chemicals we work with that are made in a lab, molecules that are made in a lab with the highest grade chemicals. It's cheating, is what others will tell you. It's cheating to use this and then pretend that that's what existed in a supposed primordial soup somewhere. But again, we're all guessing. We're guessing entirely, right? I wasn't there when the universe was made, neither was anybody doing the research today, so we're all guessing, and it's educated, obviously. They have educated guesses, but they're using synthetic chemicals that are like never skip leg day, bro, like the most powerful genes that can be, and they're trying to monkey with them. There's research that has been done that has said, how much can we strip from a cell and keep it alive? There's some 700 plus genes within a cell that we can examine in the simplest life forms out there. The name's escaping me. I might have it in my notes, but it's genitalium, something genitalium, forgive me. The simplest organism we're aware of that exists in a molecular form. Has a membrane. It's extremely complex. Homeostasis within the cell, letting protons in and out, letting in certain things, sometimes forcing them in, pushing others out. An amazing, simple organism like that. There's some roughly 800, a little bit less than that, genes. I think it was like 795. And they said, how much can we remove from this and keep it alive? Let it stay in some sort of homeostasis, which is that it can survive. It has equilibrium. It can live in a world trying to kill it. The membrane is very, very important, and this thing needs to exist. They got it down to like 420 genes that are required. And it was like on life support. I mean, this thing was not going to replicate. It was not going to do well. So in evolution, you can break stuff. And you could say, oh, look, we've done something with the cell by manipulating it. All you can do is break it. They created nothing new, and they had to bring that number back up and add genes back in to the high fours. I think it was 495, if I remember right. So it went from like 795 to like 420 and then back up to like 495. And the thing was still, it was like chopping off your legs and your arms, and yet you're still alive. But now we got to bring in a wheelchair. And now we took out your kidneys, we got to put you on dialysis. Ooh. And then we took out your eyes, now you can't see. That's all they can do.
Just stripping it away.
But they'll purport this as some kind of a win in the lab because we can manipulate the thing. But it won't replicate. It won't produce. It's going to dwindle and die. It will destroy healthy cells because it multiplies quicker because it's simpler. But it's literally like they're creating monsters that don't work. They are not anything like, and imagine the difference between that with the genes. If you're going from 795, even close to that, give or take, down into the 400s, you just took half the thing out. And yeah, if I go to your car right now, bro, and I take out the seats,
start taking stuff out,
take off the mirrors, take off the lights, you can still drive down the road. But that's not.
It's not going to be
effective,
correct.
And that's the argument where we're always going to have to come back to with science and time and the question: could it have developed? The answer is no. And certainly not even in the time that you purport it could have. Now, once you start asking these questions, you will see people go from sounding very sure about their theories to having nothing but philosophical commitments that they're just going to dig their heels in on and make their claims. Yeah. Now, that doesn't make it any different than from any other worldview where the same thing is going to be encountered. Why do I believe what I believe? You can challenge it.
So where does the superiority come in? Because as we see, and you've experienced it, dealing and talking with other scientists, and their opinion is right. What they believe
in their sewing circles.
Yeah. Right? Why do they feel superior to what your opinion would be on creation?
I would chalk it up in a lot of reasons. What would it do for you if 10,000 people cited you as a genius?
Yeah, I was going to say the
pride.
Ego.
Now, again, and I don't mean to cast a total dispersion on everybody doing
absolutely not
a science. I don't want to do that. But I do know. Yeah, be careful. You're right near the edge. Yeah. I don't want you going over. That'd be funny though. I mean, we'd keep that in.
We won't edit that out.
And when we talk like this, we can be dismissed as if we're saying every buddy that's convinced of Darwinian evolution is a liar or is a pride-filled this or that. I don't think that's the case. I think the most dangerous thing comes in all religions, including Darwinism, I will call it that, when you think something is true but it's not. So Mark Twain, I think, was the one who had that famous quote. He said, "It ain't the stuff you don't know that gets you into the trouble. It's the stuff you do know for sure that just ain't so." That's the stuff that gets in trouble. And you got people that honestly believe this is a evidential fact. They're committed to it.
And they're going to push it as much as they can.
Yeah, and to surrender that would be to surrender what they consider to be already truthful.
Yeah.
It would be tantamount to you turning from Christ.
Correct.
Right? To turn from a naturalistic worldview that they believe is superior in its investigative certainty. So there's been studies done on leaves, and this is an important subject. Maybe we end on this today to answer that question you asked. Reductionism is an idea that I first thought of in this subject not very long ago when I watched a discourse from a Dr. Dennis Noble.
Okay.
Now, Dennis Noble, I've seen him on platforms. He taught Richard Dawkins, who's the noted neo-Darwinist, anti-theist. He's the most vociferous condemner of Christianity. He's like the leader of the four horsemen, these atheists that think they're...
He's the first one.
You know who Dawkins is.
Yes.
Most of us do.
Yeah.
Wrote a lot of books, made a lot of money. My understanding is he's a biologist, an evolutionary biologist. I watched him, like Dr. Noble was on his doctoral dissertation review staff. So he's like the mentor of this guy. And I watched them debate. He's wrote a book, Dennis Noble did, saying why Dawkins is wrong in his assumptions.
His mentor.
Yeah. Yeah, his mentor is saying, as a scientist, another English guy, looks like a scientific John Piper. You'll see maybe if you see the picture of Dennis Noble. I can't figure out if he's an atheist or not. He said things about the supernatural and the spirit that I respect, but he's kind of saying, he's a musician too, so he views life as beautiful a little more. He'd want to use terms like that. And he talked about reductionism. And he said, quote, that the neo-Darwin view is a house of cards, that they make claims that they write checks that the science can't cash. I'm saying that. That's not a quote of his,
right.
But he said it's a house of cards, and he's writing against it, but he's saying things like the spiritual is that which is beautiful and phenomenal and fascinates us. I can't tell if that's a deistic claim or just more of a wonder of life thing. I'd like to know. Because the guy, again, is a wonderful scientist to listen to. But he talked about reductionism. And reductionism, I think, is the answer to your question. I think it's what most of us do. How many of us have time to sit down and read The Origin of the Species? Charles Darwin's original 1859 book. 99.9% of the people that believe in evolution never read it.
Never read it.
Okay. I know that most people don't have time. You're working 40 hours a week, and you're going to college the other 20 hours a week. Most people aren't doing that, but whatever, some number
similar to that.
You got to play video games.
The business of life, right?
Yeah, you got to go on a date. You got to do your thing. You got to take vacation. You got to go to the beach.
Play sports, all this stuff.
Who's going to sit down and read Darwin's Doubt by Stephen Meyer?
Yeah,
which is a great theistic work, a Christian work that I recommend everybody read. Darwin's Doubt, Stephen Meyer, phenomenal book. It's big, it's weighty, it takes time. So here's how reductionism works. I don't have time for all that, but you just sold me one little idea of one little Here's the biggest one. Richard Lenski's long-term bacterial study, where a man in a lab named Richard Lenski, for decades, observed the replication of a certain bacteria in I think it was 70 generations. Now that doesn't sound right. I forget how long the term the study was. It was decades.
Decades.
And he just kept these bacteria in flasks that constantly swished, and he observed them throughout the decades. And what he observed was changes in them, like the drop of their flagellar motor, the thing that propels them around in the goo. And what he observed, the amazing thing is they developed the ability, he said, to eat a new element called citrate. Citrate, like this is it. They developed the ability to they lose the tail and they eat citrate. And previously they couldn't, and now they're eating citrate. This is, man, scientists
look
were...
what we just did.
This is the reductionism. This is the biggest one, by the way. If you want to study, like, and I've had it thrown at me, I can show you the text right now from my friend Evan. You will have this study thrown at you as definitive evidence of evolution before our very eyes.
Wow.
And number one, I'd note, at the beginning and the end of the study, they were still bacteria. And they were nothing but bacteria, and there was no change that would make you go, oh, in another, here's the hero, billion years from now, I'm going to come back in and there's going to be a wombat chilling right there. That is where the science leaves the building and the science fiction enters in.
Yeah.
And we need to stop that. We need to say right there, stop. The observable evidence, reductionism, however, if you're looking to prove something, they lost a tail. Why did they lose a tail? Most people would say because Lenski is feeding them, they become spoon-fed and lazy.
They no longer need
They don't need it because they're constantly swished. I'm eating what I can eat, which they like eating glucose. Sugar is the primary fuel of all life, by the way, as I understand it. And so they lose this thing, but again, evolution can break stuff. You can't add on. So what about eating the citrate? What was discovered is that they could always eat citrate. The ability to do so is within the simple bacteria that were in the study, and what his experimentation did was turn on the ability to eat the citrate that you can turn off later on in these cells by controlled experiment. They could always do it, is the point.
So it wasn't anything new.
Nothing.
They could always have done it.
There were studies subsequent of that same bacteria being dug up like in the guts of like frozen explorers that had it present that could eat the citrate. They could do it. It's in, my point is, it is in, this is what it proves. It was always in the genetic ability of those bacteria to do it. Now, the long-term study showed it happening. And people, if you leave out all the evidence and you go to
Everything
just this
else.
one point, now I can extrapolate wild theories because I do have one certain something and I reduce down. I don't have time to to look at everything else. So we'll buy into definitive statements like Richard Lenski did a long-term bacterial study and showed these things evolving based on certain introduced antibiotics and criteria, and they could eat citrate, and they lost their flagellar motor. But the bacteria at the end still will not reproduce. They become
It was still a bacteria?
weak. Yeah, and it's still a bacteria.
Oh, okay.
There are limits within the DNA. There are limits within what God has created. And that's where the science and the science fiction has to be carefully weeded out.
Yeah.
And most people presented with this will agree with what we're saying. You can't look at a simple reductionist idea and say, therefore, based on that, any hypothesis you present, I can now, I can agree with you.
Wow.
That's what happens, though. And how does it happen? It's not through usually devilish means like we're trying to do it. We don't have time. I don't have time to consider what you're saying. Most people work at Walmart are not sitting around studying Richard Lenski's experiment
And reading that big
and
old
reading the paper.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have time for that. Who has
Right.
time for that? Guys that sit around in university and write papers. They got time for it. That's what they get paid to do, right?
Yeah, that's their job.
And so it's not just that they're mendacious, it's that they can be convinced of something based on one small idea. And this is what Dennis Noble was pointing out to Richard Dawkins, that it's in neo-Darwinism a lot of reductionism, and he said there's a difference between atheism and anti-theism. And the neo-Darwinists are anti-theistic.
Wow.
They are hostile. You get your Sam Harris, you get your Richard Dawkins.
Guys that are
They will ad hominem attack the speaker. They will go to moral arguments about God as a monster, and yet, oddly, therefore, they're saying the Bible is true, because they're saying if this is true, he's a monster, and this is my argument. You know, but they're anti-theistic, and they're not just atheistic.
Yeah.
And so we have a climate of people born that are doing this reductionistic thing, and they don't even realize it. Yeah. Because they went to a biology class, which was 3 months.
A little sliver of information.
They got a graphic designer, give them the best evidence of evolution. There it is. It's in a picture.
And they're forming their truth based off of that little sliver, that little reduced.
Yeah. This is so important. And this is where evolution has made its... We all know that if you have a big PR firm, and it's been well said, I think it was Hitler that originally said, the more you tell a lie, the bigger the lie, the more you tell it, right? People will believe it.
Oh, yeah.
You just got to keep telling it. How about, we don't know if it's a baby in the womb? Yeah. There's a lie that if you keep saying it...
You spin that the right way, though, you get a lot of people to believe it.
And most of them don't have time to go down and watch a late-term abortion and go, oh my goodness, smell the blood. See the woman convulsing on the table, and them reassemble the body parts on a table to make sure they got it all out of her womb, because they don't want anything to rot inside of her. They don't have time to go do that. They don't have interest or time. And so we assume lies very easily. Now, we're all susceptible to this. We can all do it. My point in this is what happens with the atheistic naturalist mindset. It's why it's so prevalent. Yeah. We are too busy to explore the alternate theories.
Oh.
We're too busy. We got career, we got retirement, we got, the kids. I got 4, you got 2, right? We got stuff to do, our wives, we're busy. We don't have time, and so we'll just assume theories because we took a class on it once.
If the devil doesn't make you bad, he makes you busy.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Think of the busyness and why we've become so busy and why society has become so busy. There's no more of that laid back, let's drink some lemonade or some iced tea out on the front porch and things are simple.
Yeah.
I believe there's a reason why. It's go, 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 go.
Yeah.
Like you said. Because then these little slivers of lies can be introduced, can be spun around, can be marketed.
Yeah.
And it can attack the masses.
And what you'll find is that the scientists in their fields who do slow down, no, let me put it this way. If you took the time to slow down and examine numerous evidences, you would find plenty of scientists out there who do not agree with Darwinism. You will find it. If you look, you will find geneticists, physicists, cosmologists, astronomers, biologists, every field, you will find scientists saying we need, Dennis Noble has talked about it actually, it's called the third way. We need another definition of evolution because the current one ain't cutting it.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't add up.
Now, these are not the guys who are going to be invited to speak at Stanford.
No.
Because the money is invested elsewhere. And if we start repudiating that, it's kind of like Carlos, if you invented tomorrow an engine that runs on water, who's going to want to kill you? Big
Ford,
automotive
GMs. I mean,
now, until they find a way to profit on your engine and phase out their engine, they don't want. And I'm not accusing anybody in particular.
Yeah,
we know this.
We know what it's run by.
There's been studies. There's been investigations done on people that have suddenly died that have great patents on amazing technologies.
Yeah.
But who's funding that? I don't know, right? And of course, a good conspiracy can rarely be proven. But with what we've learned over the last decade or so, conspiracy theories could just be called spoiler alerts. Mm-hmm. There's so much insanity out there and things going on. If you purport a theory that challenges the billion-dollar endowment of your university, obviously I'm going to call you a nut. I'm not going to want you to come and speak unless you're a guy like Jim Tour. Now, Jim Tour, he needs to refine his debate skills. You see the guy, he's not into debate. He's not used to it. He's not a great debater. He needs to get better at that. But the genius of the man can't be dismissed. He's a noted, published, patent-holding, business-owning, 35-year organic chemist with a high H index. I didn't even know what that was until I looked into it, where everybody can be a scientist, but what's your H index? Your H index measures how much you have been cited in the research of others. So if you got a low H index, you're not published, you're not doing a lot of papers, you're not doing stuff, you're going to have a low influence in your field. Well, a guy like me has no H index. A guy like Jim Torres is very high. You can't dismiss the man.
Yeah.
You can't say he doesn't know what he's talking about. And so it becomes this necessary, you can come through, man, you're good. He's turning around. It becomes this credentialed lie that, again, if we just took the time to look, if we could look, you will find plenty of people throughout history, by the way, in all the scientific disciplines that are not anti-theistic. They are not naturalists. They are not people out there saying, I think there's a natural explanation for how life came to be. As yet, and we'll finish on this, as yet, origin of life studies, here's my definitive scientific statement about how life came to be, have produced absolute bupkis.
Nothing.
Nada. And you'll see them challenged on it, and you'll see what happens. They have not produced we are further from being able to explain it naturally than we were 50 years ago. That is what scientists are telling me. And again, I hope to meet with that doc I mentioned here.
That'd be
when
great.
I learned he was at USF. I'm not going to mention his name here, but I'm hoping to find him and speak with him because he's here.
Yeah.
And he's agreed to meet with me, and maybe he can come on and make us smarter on certain things in chemistry that support all that we're saying. But we looked at a few things today just by way of review, and as believers we're talking about the myth of neutrality. This is so important. If you leave this out of anything in life, you can end up believing lies and having confusion. Any area of life, including the one we represent.
Absolutely.
Homology. We talked about homology and how through the process of reductionism, you can even manipulate data to find answers in certain cytochrome and looking at sections of DNA that you want, and then you can make claims that aren't true, but because you're reducing it all down to one area. This is very common, and we talked about how that can happen. We talked about time as the hero of the plot. Next week or 2 weeks, you're going to be, I think, here whenever we come out again.
Yeah.
I want to talk about some other things that scientists are saying about peer review. I've got that as a topic. I've got vestigial organs. We're going to look at them and go over some of the claimed vestigial organs. That's one that's going to be thrown at you big time. You don't have wisdom teeth. You don't need them. You got the little flexor in your wrist that if you do this, some people have and some people don't. And what about the appendix and the tailbone? And we're going to look at those things and see that there's a better answer out there than what we've been sold because we don't have time to look at it.
Yeah.
We really don't. And really, how many of us went through biology class in college anyway and just wanted to graduate? It was like doing...
Gotta get through it.
It was like doing English. Like, I just need to get it done.
Gotta get it done.
And so we're just indoctrinated with a naturalist worldview that is not supported by the data. Or reason, or wisdom, or anything else, which is always supported by data and the sciences.
Yeah, this is all amazing information.
Yeah.
You know,
it is.
Brother Joseph, I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to in 2 weeks when we come back together and getting into some of those other topics as well. And
we'll get some folks out here, I hope, that can challenge it.
Absolutely.
We'll see them come with those, and we'll see if we can reason through it. Because again, and I'll finish with this, what we said 2 weeks ago, and what I want to say again is, stop pretending you have something we don't. If you are a naturalist out there, the assumption is we have science and a creationist just has faith, which is this blind, speculative, nonsensical, unsupported worldview. We want to challenge that.
Absolutely.
And that's really, if we can get there with someone to show them, you just have an opinion too. That's it.
Yeah.
And I have an opinion, and you have an opinion. So come to the table and let's debate it. It's a victory.
Absolutely.
Because the assumption is we don't need that faith stuff anymore. We have science.
Yeah.
And that is not a
completely
scientific statement.
Yeah.
It's not a scientific statement. It's not a reasonable statement. And that's what we want to challenge by looking at different things and considering them.
Amazing.
God bless. Awesome.
God bless. All right, we're signing off till next week or next couple weeks.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody for tuning in.
We're going to have to get a fan too, man. We're going to have to get something. We'll get some palm
Let's get
tree-
creative.
We'll get some atheists
Maybe that's
out
when we
here.
bring the guys out.
We'll get some atheists out here with some big palm branches to fan us.
Yeah, I
during
like
the
it.
talks, man. Because it feels a little better though.
Yeah,
than
no,
at
it
the
actually
start.
it cooled down a little.
I'm
bit.
a little used to it or something. Maybe.
Yeah, I think we
adapted.
acclimated.
I adapted.
Oh
yeah.
man, we got to get
What's
into
going
that
on?
next week.
Maybe next week when we come out, I'll have the start of a skin flap.
Okay.
Over my head that will shade my
Let's see if
children.
it goes that fast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe. So, all right.